It comes from 26,000 yards away, beyond the curve of the Earth itself. The weapon rains down with terrifying precision, yet there's nothing on the horizon. No enemy warship, no attacker in sight. It's June 1942, and naval warfare has just changed forever. Aboard the minesweeper HMS Hebe, sailors frantically scan the Mediterranean waters as explosions erupt around them, sending walls of water towering over their side. HMS Hebe is part of Operation Harpoon, a desperate Royal Navy mission carrying vital supplies to Malta. The besieged island fortress is barely holding on against Axis forces hammering the Mediterranean. But the most deadly threat comes from an enemy the British can't even see. The key to the Mediterranean. In the summer of 1940, the Mediterranean was safe and secure in Allied hands. To the west, the French Navy dominated the basin, while to the east, Admiral Cunningham's mighty British Mediterranean fleet protected supply routes to Egypt, Palestine, and the island of Malta, a crucial outpost that allowed the Allies to strike directly at Axis convoys moving between Italy and North Africa. But when Italy entered the war and France surrendered, Malta, once protected by a ring of friendly fleets, was now at the center of an increasingly hostile sea. The island needed supplies to keep Egypt and the Suez Canal secure. The Axis forces were determined to make sure they never arrived. With every passing month, convoys headed toward the island came under heavier and much more coordinated attacks. Submarines lurked along the routes, fast torpedo boats struck at night, and bombers waited overhead for any ship attempting to break through. By early 1942, the Axis supply runs to North Africa were moving with growing ease. Malta's striking power was shrinking fast. Luftwaffe raids surged past 5,000 tons of bombs in a single month, while British submarines were being forced out, and airfields lay in ruins. Reconnaissance flights of the area were blind to most Axis movements. The last straw came on March 21, 1942, when convoy MW-10, 5 merchant ships escorted by a heavy screen of cruisers and destroyers, set out from Alexandria to Malta with just over 5,000 tons of supplies. Though the group fought its way past the Italian fleet during the Second Battle of Sirte, this delay proved fatal. Within 2 days, every merchant ship was sunk or burning in port. With destroyers and cruisers stretched thin, London ruled out any convoy to Malta in May. The island would have to hang on until the Admiralty knew what to do. In the meantime, Axis bombers pounded its docks, airfields, and naval facilities. Then, the bombing turned inward, striking barracks, camps, supply depots, and crossroads in what looked like preparation for invasion. In that month alone, Axis aircraft flew over 9,500 sorties, compared to just 388 by the Royal Air Force. By June 1942, Malta, the island that had once threatened the lifeline feeding Rommel's forces, was faltering. Food reserves were thinning, and the population, both military and civilian, faced rationing that grew harsher by the week. Occasional aircraft made the dangerous run from distant bases, but they could bring only so much. Now or never. In early June, seeing no other option, the British Chiefs of Staff and the Admiralty prepared for a full-scale, two-pronged naval effort to resupply the island from opposite ends of the Mediterranean. From the west, Operation Harpoon would sail from Gibraltar, while from the east, Operation Vigorous would depart from Alexandria. Everyone involved in the planning knew that at least one convoy, most likely both, might not reach its destination. Harpoon's convoy consisted of 6 merchant ships. To protect them, the Royal Navy assembled Force X, a close escort led by Rear Admiral Alban Thomas Buckley Curtis aboard the light cruiser HMS Kenya, joined by the anti-aircraft cruiser HMS Cairo and the light cruiser HMS Liverpool. The screen included destroyers HMS Bedouin, HMS Partridge, and HMS Ithuriel, along with minesweepers HMS Hebe, Speedy, Rye, and Swal. The carrier HMS Eagle, part of the broader covering force, had just flown in additional Spitfires to Malta and turned back, while the battleship HMS Malaya and other heavy units remained positioned to deter surface attacks, though they would not continue with the convoy into the Sicilian Narrows. In the weeks leading up to Harpoon and its eastern counterpart, the British launched a coordinated air effort to clear a path. Beginning in late May, the British struck Axis airfields, rushed Spitfires to Malta, and scattered bombers and scouts across the Mediterranean. The sabotage team slipped into Crete. But for all the planning and firepower, the convoy would still be sailing straight into some of the world's most dangerous waters. The Harpoon convoy slipped out of Gibraltar on June 12, 1942. 6 merchant ships packed with food, fuel, and ammunition. Troilus, Birdwin, Harari, Tannenbar, Chant, and the tanker Kentucky. Around them moved Force X, while further out, Force W kept watch. Dangers from within. All through June 13th, the convoy pressed eastward, engine steady as they followed the North African coast. The merchant ships held tight formations and were screened by their escorts. Across the sea, Axis forces watched and waited. Italian reconnaissance planes shadowed the group from a distance, and every port and airfield in Sicily, Sardinia, and Tunisia stood on high alert, ready to strike. In the Black Mediterranean night, at precisely 2:52 a.m. on June 14th, the Italian submarine Warship was the first to directly attack the convoy, sending a series of torpedoes that detonated prematurely in the water. Just as the first rays of dawn broke across the horizon, an Italian reconnaissance flight roared overhead, spotting the convoy just 50 nautical miles north of Cape Bugaroni. The aircraft banked hard, positioned halfway between Algiers and Bizerte, but before it could do any kind of damage, a duo of British fighters from HMS Eagle sent the enemy aircraft plunging into the sea before it could transmit a report. Nerves were running high among the escort vessels. In the confusion, HMS Escapade detected what appeared to be a periscope cutting through the waves and immediately opened fire, only to find out they had targeted team member HMS Westcott, returning from refueling operations. During the friendly fire incident, somewhere in the close distance, the Italian submarine Giada lurked nearby, tracking the massive convoy through its periscope. At 6:05 a.m., 2 of her torpedoes sliced through the water and right toward HMS Eagle. Inside the vessel's cramped control room, crew members pressed their headphones to their ears, counting 3 distinct explosions and marking their charts with a confirmed hit. The morning sun brought no rest for the convoy, as another Italian spotter plane found the convoy, now moving about 90 nautical miles southwest of Cape Teolada in Sardinia. This time, the report reached the Aeronautica della Sardinia, an important base recently strengthened by nearly 200 bombers and fighters. Soon enough, the distinctive shapes of Savoia Marchetti SM-79 torpedo bombers appeared on the horizon, their engines growling louder and louder as they neared the formation, flying as low as possible. Once close enough, their torpedoes tore right into the merchant ship Tannenbar and the plates of HMS Liverpool. Seeing her wounded sister, Antelope moved alongside, passing heavy cables across to the cruiser. With no way to make it to Malta, the duo began a slow, vulnerable journey back to Gibraltar. As the threats multiplied from air and sea, the main covering force turned back toward Gibraltar later that day, unable to push through to the Strait of Sicily. The still functional fast mine layer Welshman pressed on alone, her extra speed her only defense against lurking submarines and circling aircraft as she reached Malta, delivered her vast cargo of ammunition, and immediately turned back to rejoin what remained of the convoy escort. A morning in Pantelleria. In the night between the 14th and the 15th, the Harpoon convoy, still battered from the day before, cut through the black waters of the Sicilian Channel, hugging the Tunisian coastline on their final stretch of the journey. At 5:20 a.m., with dawn just about to begin, the convoy cut through calm seas 25 miles southwest of Pantelleria, and the radio operator aboard Cairo's headphones cracked with an urgent message from a reconnaissance aircraft. 2 enemy cruisers bearing down from the north, closing fast and only miles away. The sudden report confirmed the Admiralty's worst fears. Italian Admiral Dezzara's 7th Division had found them, and the force was substantial. Cruisers Montecuccoli and Eugenio de Savoia, with the 10th Destroyer Flotillas Ascari, Oriani, and Premuda forming their forward screen. Behind them came the 14th Destroyer Flotillas Vivaldi and Malicello, completing the large enemy formation. Just as the first light of dawn crept across the water at 5:30 a.m., lookouts on both sides of the convoys called out sightings nearly simultaneously. Only 10 minutes later, the calm morning silence stopped when Eugenio de Savoia's forward batteries erupted in orange flame, shells screaming across 16,000 meters of open water toward Cairo. All around Hardy's flagship, towering plumes of seawater erupted around her, the near misses sending ocean spray across her decks. Within seconds, every warship in both formations opened fire. The Italian cruisers accelerated to 32 knots, their engines driving them forward as they pounded the British escort without pause. With this move, Dezzara's strategy became clear, as Malicello and Vivaldi peeled away to pursue the vulnerable merchant ships. Fire from all sides. Under Hardy's orders, destroyers began laying dense smoke screens, sending billowing clouds of white chemical smoke pouring from their insides and creating a protective blanket to shield the merchantmen. Now more or less hidden, Hardy ordered the convoy to alter course toward the Tunisian coast, with the minesweepers escorting them to safety as fast as possible. For a full hour, the warships dueled across the open water, with the Italian cruisers sustaining light damage, paint scorched and upperworks torn, but all remained combat effective. The British escort, however, suffered much worse. HMS Bedouin took multiple hits that tore through her hull, leaving compartments flooded and fires raging. Partridge, too, absorbed punishing blows that reduced her speed and fighting capability. Even the sturdy Cairo shuddered under the impact of Italian shells, cold seawater flooding into damaged compartments below her waterline. In the midst of the melee, the destroyers Vivaldi and Malicello hunted the merchantmen that had turned west-southwest. They were met head-on by the destroyers, their guns ready and blazing to protect the vulnerable cargo ships. At 6 a.m., facing unexpectedly heavy resistance, the two enemy ships turned away. They would soon regret this mistake. A single British shell found its mark on Vivaldi, smashing right into her forward engine room, causing building-high flames to erupt from her insides, all visible for miles across the morning sea. Feeling the impact on his ship, Commander Ignazio Castrogiovanni, commander of the flotilla, ordered Malicello to withdraw to safety. However, Malicello's captain, refusing to abandon his sister ship, instead laid protective smoke screens around the wounded Vivaldi, all while her guns still fired defiantly at the pursuing British destroyers. Only then could both Italian vessels slip away from the engagement, damaged and defeated. Water strategy. Following a very brief respite, the air above the Mediterranean erupted with the terrifying drone of German Ju-88 bombers diving toward the scattered convoy. Merchant ship Chant took a direct hit, bombs punching through her deck and igniting her cargo. With fuel, coal, and ammunition, three of the most powerful agents packed in her holds, her captain gave the order: abandon ship. Within moments, men scrambled down ropes and nets into waiting lifeboats as fast as possible, while flames consumed the vessel from within. The tanker Kentucky fared little better. A German bomb crashed into the sea mere yards from her hull, the underwater shockwave making her propellers stop suddenly, leaving her dead in the water. Quickly, minesweeper HMS Hebe moved to help, passing heavy cables to begin the slow, vulnerable task of towing the massive vessel. Just out of the chaos, the Italian cruisers Montecacholi and Eugenio de Savoia outmaneuvered the British formation. Now, as close as 6,500 yards, perfect range for naval gunnery. Every single one of her guns, even her 37mm anti-aircraft guns, joined the barrage, all firing in unison at their maximum range. With that order, Admiral Dezzara seized the tactical advantage, directing his ships to swing wide to the southwest. The maneuver let his cruisers line up broadsides against the exposed flank of the British escort. Then, with perfect timing, he turned north, slipping through the British smoke screens, using them to mask his own approach. But the Italian leader wasn't finished. He directed his formation to the very edge of a known minefield. By 8:30 a.m., with no Italian warships visible, Captain Hardy worked to regroup his scattered force. The merchantmen had fled toward Tunisian waters with their minesweeper escorts. The challenge now was bringing the formation back together, quite a difficult task given the damaged escorts. Bedouin and Partridge moved slowly, their hulls torn, fires extinguished, but leaving scorched compartments throughout both vessels. Kentucky remained under tow by HMS Hebe, moving at a turtle's pace in perilous waters. As Captain Hardy assessed his options, German aircraft returned, this time making merchant ship Birdwin's engines stop cold. The leader had no choice but to admit it. The damaged Kentucky and Birdwin would never reach Malta. Their painfully slow speed would endanger the entire convoy. Orders were given to scuttle Kentucky and Birdwin, transfer their crews to the remaining vessels, and then press on to Malta with the few ships that still had a fighting chance. The longest shot. Meanwhile, Admiral Dzara reached his planned ambush point at the northern end of the minefield. Finding no British ships, he reunited with his destroyers, Ascari and Oriani, before turning southwest toward towering columns of black smoke from SS Chant staining the horizon, and on the brink of succumbing to its damage. At 11:55 a.m., the Italian formation arrived at the scene. While the burning hulks of Kentucky and Birdwin dotted the seascape, Dzara focused on a more valuable target, Partridge, slowly towing the severely damaged Bedouin, with the minesweepers nearby. Only 20 minutes later, seeing the approaching Italian warships, Partridge cut the tow lines to Bedouin and turned west, accelerating away, a difficult decision that saved the former but sealed the latter's fate. From nearly 30,000 yards away, Montecuccoli opened fire, her guns flashing on the now sunny horizon. Aboard HMS Hebe, officials watched in disbelief as the first salvo landed near her. Before most even knew what hit them, columns of water erupted around the ship. Then one shell slammed into her hull. The already damaged Bedouin, now without hope of escape, received the concentrated fire of both Italian cruisers. Shells crashed into her already wounded hull, igniting new fires and flooding more compartments. A final blow would come later, in the shape of an Italian SM-79 torpedo bomber. Mission accomplished. At 2:20 p.m., with their mission complete, the Italian squadron set course for home, and the waters of the Sicilian Channel gradually calmed. The naval battle of Pantelleria was over. As dusk settled over the Mediterranean, the battered ships of Operation Harpoon limped toward Malta's harbor entrance, and the day's brutal fighting had shredded their carefully laid plans. The minesweepers should have gone first, clearing the path, while Cairo and her escorts turned back for Gibraltar. Now, with their ammunition stores nearly depleted from hours of fighting off Italian warships and waves of aircraft, the convoy had no choice but to enter the harbor and restock, as German bombers were sure to return at first light. As the motor launches took the lead, HMS Cairo stopped at the harbor entrance and directed the merchant ships Orari and Troilus to proceed ahead. The crew of Troilus watched with relief as the shore grew closer than ever. Suddenly, at only 1,200 feet, she struck a mine. The explosion damaged her hull, fortunately hitting a coal-filled hold, limiting the flooding. Despite the damage, she managed to continue into the harbor. However, behind them, disaster multiplied. The destroyer Badsworth hit another mine, her bow crumpling. Then Kujawiak struck another, the explosion tearing through her hull with enough force to doom her. Men scrambled for lifeboats as she began to list. The minesweeper Hebe hit yet another mine, followed by Matchless. Even Orari, so close to safety, struck one in her final approach. From the shore, Maltese spotters watched with a mixture of hope and horror. The island had been starving for months. Every ship that sank meant thousands of tons of precious supplies lost. Yet there were 2 survivors pushing through, despite everything. The end of the road. Inside Malta's harbor, a small army of men, soldiers, workers, and civilians alike, all of them gaunt from months of ever smaller rationing, awaited the ship's arrival. Already, the smoke generators were pumping out thick clouds to conceal the arriving ships from any sudden air attack. With Orari and Troilus finally secure at their birds, the dock burst into controlled chaos. People swarmed the vessels, opening hatches, setting up hoists, and preparing to empty every hold as quickly as human hands could manage. The rhythm of unloading never stopped. Every able man worked 12-hour shifts, passing crates hand to hand, rolling barrels, and hauling sacks of flour. Even additional specialists were flown in that same night from Alexandria. For 5 days, 3,500 tons of food, ammunition, and fuel, the very lifeblood of Malta's resistance, moved daily from the ships to shore, to then be unloaded, dispersed, and hidden in rock shelters across the island. In the end, Operation Harpoon marked one of the few surface victories for the Italian Navy during the war, with a decimated convoy, 1 destroyer sunk, another one badly damaged, and 3 more damaged ships. Of the 6 merchant ships that departed Gibraltar, only 2 reached Malta. Back in the Allied port, Cairo and the surviving escorts finally returned, scorched and battle-worn. Meanwhile, Hebe sat in dry dock, wounded but fixable. A month of repairs lay ahead before she would be declared seaworthy again, one more battle-scarred veteran of the war's most dangerous sea lane. And though the 15,000 tons of offloaded supplies were far fewer than the 50,000 expected, those 2 ships brought just enough to keep the island fighting. The following week, throughout the Mediterranean, wireless operators relayed the news. Malta would hold, though not for long. Everything depended on the next attempt, Operation Pedestal, a resupply mission that would decide if the island could survive at all.